My work varies, and I try to keep it that way. I shoot resorts, I shoot commercials, I shoot documentaries, I light networks, I light food. I just try to stay busy and keep changing everything up so I don't get bored. And so what has happened over the years is the gear has changed, the cameras have changed yet again, and with all the DSLRs and all the incredibly light-sensitive cameras, the integration of LEDs is starting to happen. And so what I said to someone earlier today is you don't get to a shoot and there's 40 LEDs sitting there. You get to a shoot, maybe there's one, or there's 5 that the company wants you to integrate into their system. And what do you need to think about? How do I use them? How do you guys use them? So what I've done is just kind of put a couple images together. These are just samples of work, some with and some not. And my lighting approach has always been simplistic. I started as a still shooter when I was a little kid and came up through that and then switched over to film and television. And I question that sometimes. You work a lot harder in this side than still. But so the work is always different, but my approach is nearly all the same. And it's try to be naturalistic, not make things look necessarily lit, but just Josh sets a pretty image and it looks like a nice place to hang or whatever. And you're always dealing with latitude problems and shade and sunlight and things, and the cameras are getting better and better. You need certain tools to fill some of those in or whatever. A lot of my work just recently has been taking me to places where I can't bring much gear. I was in the country of Georgia shooting late last fall on the history of wine, and I was just in places either with very little power or no power at all, and certainly a very small crew, myself and the director. So I started bringing LEDs along. I brought these little lowcasters or broadcasters with me, and maybe one KinoFlow, and that would be about all I'd have, a couple of grip things and off and running. So just on the note of LED integration is, for me, it goes into all kinds of different work. And it starts with news sets right now. Today, this is in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm either helping the company integrate and design them into the set where they end up being a part of the actual set design, and areas glow or change colors or whatever per the show. And then we're also obviously lighting the talent with them as well. So I was mentioning, I did this presentation earlier, and I was saying that if you're starting with a new facility, it's a big discussion, because you're going to set up your power differently, you're going to set up how you control the instruments differently, it's all DMX, etc. You don't need all the huge dimmer packs. And you're going to be purchasing, at the moment, some more expensive lights, but what they'll save in power and everything else over the next couple of years, it'll pay itself off in spades. If you're an established studio and you just want to integrate a couple, it's a nice thing to do, it'll eventually pay itself off, but it's a different kind of conversion going on. So I just try to talk about how the jobs I'm getting into. This is CCTV, Chinese television in Hong Kong, and they're doing 35 news bureaus around the world. And the problem in my mind of what's going on right now is LED is a buzz. Everybody's talking about it, everybody knows what it is, and they think it's the green thing, the right thing to do. So someone in the corporate headquarters of CCTV, and hopefully they're not sitting here, said, I have a great idea, let's just buy 12 of these, I call them blasters, Philips blasters, and just the white light blasters, no barn doors, no control, no nothing. And those 12 lights will light all 35 news bureau sets, regardless of the set design or anything. And so that's a really simple approach to it, but unfortunately that's not how lighting works. So this took me about a week and a half to finally finish, and I had to beg and borrow gear and ended up using a couple of tungsten Fresnels, but in general, I got them to work and ended up having to buy flags. These are all video walls that couldn't be touched with light, and everything's glowing internally and things, so it had to have a look. And these soffits right here were touching my hair, so the set's that low. So I have things bolted into the back of these. You can see little bits of it over there with flags and such, and I had to work also for a 2-person interview here, so they had to be able to turn in different directions and still have soft light from little tiny sources, which kind of doesn't really work that way. So I had to craft it and really work it. And finally, I was telling someone today, somebody came from the network at the end, and they said, wow, this looks fantastic. And I said, I'm glad you're happy. And they said, so this lighting thing's actually complicated. I said, yeah, there's a little bit to it. So they said, so the 12 light thing isn't working. I said, not at all. So the point of that is just everybody's getting caught up in the buzz right now. And it isn't the end all of lighting. It's a craft. You need tools. You need ways to shape it and affect it, etc. So this is what I like the talent to look like. And not everyone looks that good, but this is what, for my eye, the look I like on camera. And she was thrilled. Everybody's happy. This is in Romania. And this is a mixture of a lot of different kinds of sources, and big soft sources and small point sources, etc. But the goal is to get, from my style, a very naturalistic look that they feel comfortable in. And these days what's happening is you're getting people from all over the world sitting on the same set. And so there's different skin tones, and they render differently from the cameras depending on how the camera's set up. So somebody might look slightly green or slightly too pink or whatever, so enter the L7. So now my little front pop key, my Fresnel, I can actually slightly alter the color per each host and get everything looking the way it should look with one single camera setup without trying to. What happens basically is the talent who makes the most money gets to look best, and then everybody falls off from there. So, and the sports guy is usually the last. So they end up just making one person look terrific, and it goes from there. But with the integration of brand new LED technology, and especially the Ariel 7 and all the controls on it, I can now shape that look without altering anything else on the set and changing the color of how the entire set renders, backgrounds and everything. So for me, that's a huge coup. So I'm starting to use them in corporate environments and industrial shoots. I'm starting to use them in all kinds of places. I'm even on food, because when you're shooting food, sometimes part of the food is looking perfect and other parts render differently in color. And chefs don't get excited about that. So we can start to manipulate certain things with the color and the way the light is coming in without, again, changing the setup of the camera. And that's making my work a lot easier. Also, with certain kinds of food, you don't want a lot of heat. So they have a very little heat output coming out of the front of these. It's all managed in the back. So it makes it very, very easy for that kind of thing. So this is kind of a range of the world we're starting to head into. And this was part of a demo I did at FedEx Television in Memphis, because they said, we have a directive. We've been told to go LED. Help. That's pretty much what they said. So I came out and did a demo, and you can probably see this is a range of different manufacturers. And here's Arri down in here, and Akinoflow and a few other manufacturers. So they all ended up doing fine, basically, in the on-camera test and things. But honestly, and I said this earlier, it's not because I'm standing up here, everybody gravitated toward this light by the end of the day. This one and the Akinoflow soft light, everyone was just like, these things are the bomb. This is it. So that wasn't me selling. I was just doing a straight up demo with everything. So there's a lot of good things about it, and I think it kind of speaks for itself once you start to play with these lights. So we go away from traditional lighting toward that, but this is what I walk into. So I've got to start to integrate into this and make sure the board's set up for DMX and the people understanding that in this set, this is an NBC set, these are graphics and they're backlit by fluorescent tubes, and they asked me to make it look like that back there. So that's a frosted Plex wall and I had them paint gray walls behind it. So behind it, I brought in little color changing LEDs, and I'm lighting up this gray wall, and you can see it through this Plex. Cameras are out here, sets out on that side, looking through. And so with a lot of dialing, we ended up generating, I think, a really close match, a really, really close match. That couldn't happen any other way. And I have another set I'm about to do, and they could not put the money out, and they're going with traditional cyc lights, and they want a blue wash. And I said, you're going to burn through so much gel, and this is such an inefficient way to go. But people are still doing that. But this is obviously the easier way of tackling that problem, and long range probably would save them money. But there's still a lot of old school thinking out there that we're trying to break down and getting people to think differently. This is for NFL and EA Sports. This is Tim Brown. And so this, you can see, this is what I was talking about, integrating. This is the gear I had left at the end of the day, and they said, oh my God, we have to make this other little room work. So I've got a couple of Akinoflows going through diffusion. I have an old Mole Richardson light. I'm bouncing that off of a white fabric for a little bit of extra fill. I've got a Lowcaster up here for a backlight so I can dial in intensity per the athlete and their hair and their color, etc. And I didn't even have any gear left. We had 4 stages going on this shoot. So I put a 1x mirror in here, and I've got this kicking off and putting a scratch on his cheek with a 1x mirror. So I was being very, very resourceful that day. But the idea, again, is that we're using all kinds of different sources. You don't walk into a lot of just pure LED shoots yet. So you've got to understand when and where is the right type of shoot to use a certain kind of tool. Another part of the same shoot, and I've got 2 Akinoflow Celebs, and up above in the middle is an L7, and that's my front pop, and they wanted it to kind of look like a press conference, and it's all the ex-Heisman winners. So they would step in and do their bit. You can see we're getting closer to roll. We were shooting on a couple of red cameras for this job. We got the Heisman Trophy here. That's lit by the Lowcaster. I think might not be it. That might have been for another setup. Here's a Lowcaster light in the Heisman. That's Barry Sanders, and he's comfortable in that environment. It looks very much how it's supposed to look for what we're doing. And then we shot it against green screen as well for a bunch of other gameplay stuff for EA Sports. So it was a mixture of being able, this has kind of a bronzy pewter cast to it. So we were dialing in the color so it rendered perfectly on the camera in a tungsten situation. And that was a huge advantage. So it was one of these little Lowcasters with the intensifier on the front, making it a bigger source. And it's also a bigger kind of soft controlled source, so that was useful there. This I just came back from, and this is in France. I was shooting in Bordeaux. I know, I had to shoot wine. But so we were shooting restaurants and chateaus and some of the famous wineries in Bordeaux. This is actually up by Paris in Versailles. This is a very, very, very high-end chef and restaurant and spa. So I've just got 2 of the LED Lowcasters, and I'm lighting the food, controlling some of the light coming through the window with diffusion fabrics and things. You can see the look kind of here that I've got is very different than what it seems like it would look to the eye. And I've just been lighting food for so long that I try to make it really, really simple. It's usually 3/4 backlight and a little bit of fill, and you let it go. So the idea is that with any of these things, I think because of the way the cameras have changed and the industry has changed now, a couple of small lights can do an awful lot for you. You can jack up the ISO without having a grainy image now, and you're basically instantly changing film stocks with no other effect. It's remarkable. So now this little tiny light can be the power of a 2K if you're shooting at ISO 6400. So that's how I'm kind of seeing it now, and I'm utilizing these lights in a variety of different shoots. You can see we're getting some very elegant looks. So the fact that we've got shallow focus now with the larger sensors, and I'm bringing very, very small kits on the road and getting this kind of look at a very high-end client situation, I'm thrilled to be using these things. So we got into bigger setups of spas. I've got 1 KinoFlow and a Lowcaster, and I had another Lowcaster tucked in somewhere. So I'm getting a tremendous amount done with a couple of instruments, and I think that's the goal of it. So for me, I'm walking around the show and seeing a lot of LED manufacturers saying, look how bright it is. That to me isn't the biggest issue anymore. It's what's the quality coming out of it? What kind of color control do you have? How can I integrate this into the world I'm working in? Can I control it from a board? Give me all these options so I know exactly what it'll do, and how consistent is it? If I buy 30 of them, do they all look exactly the same? And that sometimes isn't really happening. So just be aware of the buzz going on, and don't jump on the bandwagon too quickly before you really start checking it out and making sure what works for the type of shoot you're doing. I think we all get sucked into the electronics a little too much.